Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today I have a very interesting topic that I think is definitely worth addressing, especially considering the last 1 or 2 years of competitive Age of Empires 2 events, where I personally think that every single map pool has included this type of map in it, and I think the drawbacks of these maps, the problems with them, have become very apparent and are definitely worth discussing. What I'm talking about here is the problem with gold in the center maps. This affects both players and viewers, by the way, because every single major tournament of the last couple of years has included some kind of gold in the center map. But it also affects the average player playing on the ranked ladder, because we see maps like Gold Rush, Golden Pit, and then more recently Golden Stream appear quite regularly in the 1v1 and team game map. And let's be completely fair for a second here. This is a classic RTS genre of maps where you want people to fight for the middle, fight for the center, and it's not bad. It's not a horrible design, and it certainly works to some degree. However, gold in the center maps have several drawbacks that especially recently have become incredibly apparent. And I don't know, I just find them a little bit boring right now. And more so than my subjective opinion, I think there are a few objective problems with gold in the center map, specifically for Age of Empires 2, that I'd love to highlight in this video. So I'll go ahead and list off some of the problems that I found with these maps, and then I'll leave it open for discussion to you guys in the comments below to see where you guys stand on this topic, both as players on the ranked ladder and whatnot, as well as viewers of competitive events. And before you guys say it's really not that big of a deal, listen, the Garrison Finals, spoiler alert, between me and Leary went to a very banger Game 9, super epic series that was decided on Golden Stream in what was a pretty lackluster Game 9. A lot of comments on Reddit and several discords criticized the tournament for ending on such a predictable and kind of bland final game, where everybody knew I was going to win as soon as I got the center, because it's really hard to come back on a gold in the middle map. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go ahead and start with the problems one by one, and we'll take it from there. So the first problem with gold in the center maps is that the center of the map already matters. Big time. The center of the map is such a strategical point in any given 1v1 game. So by putting gold in the center, whoever controls that not just has the gold in the middle, but now you also have the center of the map, combining two advantages in what seems to be just one thing or one area of the map. You have the gold and you also have the middle control. Those two advantages together can really snowball. But just for now, let's talk about why the center of the map is already a really strong strategical position to have. So forget about the gold in the middle. If you just have the middle of the map, you have the best strategical point to push from, because most of your opponent's base will be in the middle, will be concentrated to his original starting position. And if you push towards that from the center of the map, you have a direct straight line towards the bulk of your opponent's base. We're talking his town centers, we're talking his farms, and we're talking his initial production building. It's only in late game, after the first like 70 to 100 vills, that players will start expanding towards the sides. So if you push from the middle to the side, it's decent, but it's not anything special. But if you have the middle of the map, you don't need to push the sides. All of a sudden, since you control the middle, you can go straight into your opponent's economy. So it's a very strategical position to push from, and so therefore having the center of the map lets you target the most vulnerable areas of your opponent's base immediately. Also, if you want to raid someone who has the center, you have to loop from either side, and you can't cross over the center of the map without him seeing you. So now you have two options. You either flank from the right and try to sneak in some raids to his economy, or flank from the left. If you pass to the center, you're running into castles, you're running into towers, and you might even just run into vision, which is enough to make your raid quite useless and predictable. And so someone who has a center is getting some very natural defense without having to actually protect his base. It also makes raiding predictable, because you know it's going to come from the right or the left, you know it can't come through the center, and so it's much easier to keep your village and your economy protected. On top of that, it splits your opponent's base in two. So if you launch a push down the center of your opponent's base and you're controlling a good portion of the front of his base, he now has the right side of his base and the left side of his base. He cannot group up easily to connect his production, to connect his economy. He has to either go to the right side of his villages or to the left side. He can't hover in the center and kind of just naturally bring his units together and then defend your push. It makes it very difficult for him to get his army from the right to connect with his army on the left without having to loop really far across the back of the map to avoid any of the pressure that's coming straight at him down the center. Meaning for him to push you back, he needs to somehow coordinate two different armies from the right or the left, or he has to somehow get all of his troops onto one side of the map without passing through some of your initial push. Because if he passes through there, he'll start leaking some units to your arbalest, to your towers, to your castles, and to your army in general. And just one last point, whoever has the center of the map has full freedom to launch raids into all aspects or all areas of his opponent's base. The guy who has the middle can easily go from the center of the map as the starting point and then send units to the right and send units to the left. And if you wanted to change course of your raid right away, you can go to the right and then quickly maneuver back to the center and rotate to the left. These quick rotations are so easy to do because you have the center of the map. It's the pivotal difference and the huge difference between being able to reliably raid your opponent in very unpredictable ways versus not being able to raid your opponent unless you go through the only option or the only predictable path. It's such a big difference, and the center of the map is already so massive. Another reason why gold in the center maps just don't really do it for me these days is that it's very snowbally. If someone has the middle of the map, which we already addressed is very, very strong strategically, then he also on top of that has virtually infinite gold access. So he just has an indefinite flow of gold, because usually gold in the center maps put something like 50k plus gold, a bunch of gold in there. So you're never really running out of gold in a standard game. It leads to a very snowbally situation. If someone has a set of the map with all the benefits that come from that position, and then on top of that has a ton of gold access, he can just spam double gold comps all day long, as well as heavy siege to push his opponent, trade down his limited gold access, and then just completely overrun him. So that's the main issue. You have infinite gold in the center, virtually infinite, and your opponent has extremely limited amounts of gold on the outside, because on these gold in the center maps, usually they put very little gold on the outside too, incentivize players to go to the center. And so it's a guy with infinite gold versus a guy with barely any gold. I wonder who's going to win that game. Man, it's very exciting as a viewer to see the guy with 50,000 gold charge paladins and heavy CA at the guy playing with halbs and skirms, who can barely afford 2 treps to put together and push that massive hill in the center. It's incredibly predictable and incredibly snowballing. On top of that, you can also use the abundant amount of gold to just buy a bunch of stone and fortify up the center. Plenty of castles, stone wall across the map, bombard towers, keeps, you name it. You can basically get a lot of stone because you have a lot of gold. And a lot of gold plus a lot of stone is so hard to deal with in the late game, especially once again with limited gold on the outside. My third point with the gold in the center maps, and kind of a drawback from making them exciting as a viewer, is that they're super one-dimensional. Let's be honest, it's very rare that these gold in the center maps have different approaches. Both players want the same thing. There's only one way to get it. They want the gold, they want the center of the map, they want everything that comes with it, so they're gonna have to fight for it. So basically, both players want it, they both fight for it, and whoever wins that initial fight and gets the middle wins the game easily. You can see this play out word for word in the Garrison Finals, that Game 9 game, like I mentioned earlier, where I won that initial fight for the center, landed a castle, and from that point onwards, I just had infinite gold. Leroy had to throw everything at me to try to clean me from the center, and if he was not able to do that, which he was not, I win the game on the spot, because he just runs out of gold. And it leads to these very one-dimensional situations where both players have to fight for it, and whoever wins that initial fight just snowballs so easily and so quickly that the opponent doesn't really have any strategic option to counterplay that. It takes a very strong, amazing strategy game like Age of Empires 2 and turns it into this linear game where you're just fighting down the center, and then after that fight, the game just ends within 10 minutes. Not very exciting both as a player and also as a spectator. And my fourth and final problem with the gold in the center maps is that there's little to no comeback mechanic. This is kind of tying into the one-dimensional aspect, but basically there's almost no comeback mechanic when you're up against that infinite gold. I don't think there's a single way to beat someone who has the middle of the map, has won a fight to get that middle of the map, or just got it for free. It doesn't really matter actually. And then you have to now find a way to come back after you've lost that control or lost that center of the map with all that gold. There's basically nothing you can do to come back into the game. Like usually if you take a bad fight, you can like either make a lot of army and try to counterattack your opponent, try to take some risks like that, try to maybe go for a faster imp and try to win the game that way. But with gold in the center maps, you can't do that, because if you go for a faster imp, your opponent can just go all in castle. He's got infinite gold. He's not even have to think about it. He just spams a bunch of knights, buys his way up to Imperial Age easily, and then within 2-3 minutes, you'll have nothing with your fast and push. If you go to raid him on the sides, again, you have to go all the way from the sides, try to raid him. He's got the center gold, so your raids will be ineffective and predictable and really just quite easy to fend off. And then once the raids are no longer possible, your opponent starts fortifying with castles, then the game will end shortly after. Simply put, these gold in the center maps can be quite literally over 1 minute after someone clearly wins the center. If someone clearly wins the center, the other guy can just easily resign on the spot. What happens usually in tournaments is because we're fighting for a lot of prize pool and we have our pride on the line as well, we don't want to give it up so easily, so we just try for another 5-10 minutes. But the viewers end up just seeing a very predictable, drawn out 5-10 minutes where the guy is just desperately trying to push in the center, obviously near impossible to make anything happen, and then he just resigns afterwards in what ends up being a very predictable, one-sided snowball that cannot be stopped and has no comeback mechanic whatsoever. So my opinion in conclusion here is that the gold in the middle maps aren't bad. They're a decent concept. It just feels like it's been overplayed. I, as a player, love strategic diversity. I love maps that require deep thinking, that really push me to my limits to come up with some interesting options, and that make me consider a lot of different strategies and a lot of different civilizations, a lot of different approaches. I find myself bored of playing and watching maps that revolve around that middle position and nothing else. There's so much value coming out of the center of the map with a bunch of gold in it that nothing else matters at the map. There's no point of even considering any other option besides fighting for it because of how impactful that middle really is. So my suggestion for tournament hosts, or just in general for Age of Empires 2 map makers and whatnot, is to realize that the middle of the map is already so important and such a strategical position to push your advantage and to set up your late game that you don't need to stack a bunch of gold in it to make the players fight for it. We're naturally going to fight for the center of the map. I would much rather see different elements being incorporated into map design to create different strategies, unique approaches, and also allow for fluent back and forth gameplay and comeback mechanics. So these are my thoughts on gold in the center maps. Let me know if you agree with me in the comments below, and also let me know if you disagree. Let me know what you guys think about it. If you guys look forward to seeing these maps, if you guys enjoy playing them, or the contrary, I'd love to hear your opinions. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And as my cat's meowing in the background like the most annoying thing that could be happening right now, I also remind you guys to check out my Patreon if you guys want to learn from me and learn how to play the game better and whatnot. And all my exclusive guides and content are of course there. And if you guys want to see my live streams, check me out on Twitch as well. Links to both Twitch and Patreon in the description below. Would love to have you guys support me on either of those platforms. And as always, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.